In the summer of 1980, a shadow fell over the bustling Harvey's Resort Hotel in State Line, Nevada. What began as an ordinary day soon turned into a harrowing ordeal when a group of men, disguised as photocopier technicians, planted a bomb inside the hotel. This bomb, containing 1,000 pounds of dynamite, was no ordinary explosive device. It was a meticulously designed trap, set to detonate if anyone attempted to disarm it. As the events unfolded, the livelihoods of staff and all those slot machines hung in the balance, with millions of dollars in damages at stake. Welcome to Capers and Cocktails, a true crime podcast that doesn't take itself too seriously and gives you something to enjoy while you listen. The following content may be disturbing to some. Discretion is advised. If you're enjoying one of our themed cocktails, ensure you're of legal drinking age and have fun, but drink responsibly. János Birges Sr. was born in Hungary in 1922. János told tales of flying World War II military missions for the Luftwaffe, or the German Air Force, while providing intelligence to the United States. That story might just be that, a story, but he definitely was a pilot for the Hungarian Air Force, fighting Soviet forces that were occupying Hungary after the Great War. Soviet forces captured him in April 1948 when he was 26 years old and sentenced him to 25 years of hard labor in Siberia. He was released after 8.5 years and immediately went back to fighting against the Soviets and was captured again only a few years later in November 1956 when fighting against Soviet forces in his hometown. János was nearly shot immediately on the spot, but because he had spent 8 years behind bars in the Soviet Gulag in Siberia, he was able to speak fluent Russian and was able to sweet-talk his way out of being killed. He was sprung from a Soviet cell 3 days later by some of his fellow revolutionaries, and then he decided to head west. It was probably a good idea, and he worked as a Red Cross interpreter. At some point, he got married to Elizabeth, and in May 1957, the two immigrated to the United States, starting out in New Jersey. Then they moved to Fresno, California, where János, who now went by the American version of his name, John Burgess, which we'll now call him John, and he worked in various fields, including opening a restaurant. He also found a lot of success in the landscaping business that he built. Elizabeth and John had 2 sons, John Jr. and Jim, and it seems like John Sr. was not exactly the nicest guy to his family. Maybe because of the rough first half of his life, he was physically abusive to his wife and emotionally abusive to his children. He used corporal punishment with his boys as well. He also used his sons as free labor for his landscaping business. He and Elizabeth divorced in 1973, but she refused to leave the property because she was afraid of what John would do to the boys. She moved into a trailer on the property and died a few years later under disputed circumstances. The cause of death said one thing, her son, at least, believed another. John, dealing with the death of his wife and his crumbled life and his own inner demons, started neglecting his businesses and spent more time at the blackjack table. In 1978, his restaurant burned down, and he spent all $355,000 of the insurance money at the tables. In 1979, John rented a studio apartment, number 26, at the Aspen Grove Apartments in State Line, Nevada, just a mile north of Harvey's Resort Hotel and Casino. Harvey's was originally opened in 1944 and operated by Sacramento meat wholesaler Harvey Gross and his wife Llewellyn. The casino itself had started as a cabin with a blackjack table and a couple of slot machines, but the couple opened the first high-rise tower and an 11-story, 197-room hotel in Nevada, just across the state line from Lake Tahoe, California, in 1963. John spent much of the next 6 months in Tahoe gambling at Harvey's, where he had become known as a high roller at the blackjack table, probably because of spending over $300,000 there. He spent so much money at Harvey's, in fact, that he actually knew and was friendly with Harvey himself. In spite of this, or maybe because of this, John started formulating the plan in his brain that he was going to get his money back from Harvey's. Because he had every intention of rolling a bomb into the hotel at some point in the future, spoiler alert, he spent his time gambling at Harvey's, observing the staff's activities, the schedule of security shift changes, and even at one point taking measurements of the curb outside the lobby door. All the while, he was continuing to spend all of his money and all of the money he did not have, losing at blackjack. We're making today's drink because it's likely that John enjoyed more than his fair share of these at the blackjack table, because as it turns out, it's one of the most popular drinks made in casinos, at least in the States. The Long Island iced tea. But while it's sipped on in casinos by high and low rollers alike, it wasn't actually dreamed up in one. For one of the origin stories, we have to go to Long Island, but not the one you're probably thinking of. Specifically, we have to go to Long Island of the Holston, an island in the Holston River at Kingsport in East Tennessee. There, in the midst of Prohibition in the 1920s, Charles Bishop, who was known as Old Man Bishop, invented the drink that packed quite a punch, including 5 liquors and maple syrup. In the 1940s, his son Ransom tweaked the original recipe by adding lemon, lime, and cola, making it resemble the drink we know today. The other origin story does come from the Long Island you probably know. Robert Rosebud Butt claimed to have invented the Long Island iced tea as an entry in a contest to create a new mixed drink with triple sec in 1972, while he worked at the Oak Beach Inn on Long Island, New York. Either way, if you didn't know, it doesn't actually taste like iced tea. It's named that for the color, not the taste. To make the cocktail version, get ready, it's a long list. Take a half a part vodka, half a part white rum, half a part silver tequila, half a part gin, half a part triple sec, half a part simple syrup, and half a part lemon juice, and add to a glass filled with ice and garnished with a lemon. Top with cola and stir to combine. For the mocktail version, add half a part non-alcoholic vodka, half a part rum syrup, half a part non-alcoholic tequila, half a part non-alcoholic gin, half a part orange juice, and half a part lemon juice to a lemon wheel garnished glass with ice. Add cola and stir to combine. Drink like you're winning your fortune at the blackjack table. In the winter of 1979, John casually told his sons that he planned to build a bomb to extort some money from the casino in State Line that was slowly bleeding him dry. In March of 1980, the IRS filed for $34,000 in back taxes owed by John Burgess. In early June 1980, John enlisted the help of his sons in stealing 1,000 pounds of dynamite from Helms Power Plant in the mountains, just east of California's Shaver Lake. Later that month, a dynamite blast in the area of North Fresno and Clovis destroyed the wooden Cruss Dry Creek Bridge located at the corner of Shepherd and DeWolf Avenue. Later, additional dynamite was found hidden in an area near the creek. John was making test runs. So that apartment that John moved into, he had also 5 roommates. The apartment was littered with beer cans and weed. But for the next 2 months, John would spend all of his days in the apartment's garage, building what he believed would be an unbeatable bomb. It must have been his roommates that were smoking the weed. In the early pre-dawn hours of August 26, 1980, 3 men dressed in blue coveralls wheeled a bomb, roughly the size of a copy machine, through a side entrance of Harvey's Resort Hotel at State Line, Nevada. It was covered with a cloth and had IBM painted roughly on the side. John's elaborately constructed bomb was rigged with more than 1,000 pounds of dynamite, attached to a complex network of triggering mechanisms. The entire device probably weighed closer to 2,600 pounds in weight. At one point, they even had the hotel security guys helping them get it in the building. The men working alongside John in the blue coveralls were 26-year-old Terry Lee Hall from Fresno and Terry's father-in-law, 52-year-old Bill Brown, also from Fresno. Bill was a former employee at John's landscaping business who had been looking for work, and apparently he got his son-in-law to tag along. John's sons apparently had openly refused to help deliver the bomb, which is why John had to find new accomplices. I couldn't really find how these two got wrapped up in this plot, but I presume that they were in it for the money. Apparently, John gave them somewhere between $100 and $2,000 each to deliver the bomb, disguised as a photocopier. Well, they would get it after he got his extortion money. Anyway, the 3 wheeled the machine, as they called it, through the casino into a service elevator, where they took it upstairs to a second-floor executive office that was at the time unoccupied. It was so heavy, it's honestly a little surprising it made it up the elevator. Next to the bomb, they placed an envelope that contained a 3-page extortion note that evidently had been typed up by John's girlfriend, Ella Joan Williams. It was titled, "Stern Warning to the Management and Bomb Squad." This note is really long, elaborate, and honestly, it's really well thought out. The note read in part, quote, "We demand $3 million in $100 bills. They must be unmarked, unbugged, and chemically untreated. If we find anything wrong with the money, we will stop all instructions for moving the bomb," end quote. The money was to be delivered by helicopter to the Lake Tahoe airport at a certain time, and the pilot was to land the helicopter facing east for some reason, and then an unnamed driver, who was not one of the three men, would come and pick up the money from the pilot. John, Terry, and Bill drove off in a white van, because of course they were driving a white van. About 20 minutes later, a slot manager working the graveyard shift contacted security after noticing the machine. It wasn't long before the casino and hotel were completely evacuated, and local, state, and federal law enforcement officials found themselves working against the clock to defuse the bomb. They warned Meatman and casino owner Harvey Gross that they were likely to fail in their goal to render safe the bomb. Harvey told the agents that he was indifferent to the building's fate, but that the prospect of an explosion leaving hundreds of his workers unemployed deeply troubled him. He reluctantly gave them permission to try, because what other choice did he have? In this case, it would have been a miracle for them to defuse the bomb. It turns out that John built quite the machine. FBI Special Agent Chris Roney would say, quote, "We had never seen anything like it. This device was a pretty sophisticated, quite complicated piece of machinery, unlike anything we'd seen before or anybody in the bomb disposal business had ever seen before," end quote. It turns out they should have listened to John when he warned in the extortion letter, quote, "This bomb can never be dismantled or disarmed without causing an explosion, not even by the creator," end quote. At 3:43 p.m. on August 27th, the explosive experts remotely detonated the shape charge. Without getting too technical, because I'm not a bomb expert and I hope you aren't either, the goal here was to separate the bomb from its brain. Unfortunately, by doing this, they accidentally activated one of the many triggers attached to the bomb. This almost instantaneously blew a 5-story crater into the side of the 11-story building, scattering dust, glass, and debris across both sides of the state line. The explosion also damaged Harrah's Casino, which was connected to Harvey's resort via a tunnel, and shattered many of its windows. Luckily, no one was injured in the explosion. As you can imagine, this plot hit the news even before the failed diffusion attempt, so the explosion happened in front of a crowd of television cameras, journalists, casino employees, and tourists and gamblers. People had actually been making bets on the explosions, and t-shirts were even being sold. Many of the onlookers in proximity cheered loudly and toasted, probably because they had won their bets on the bomb exploding. John, watching from the television, was also happy, feeling at least, according to his son, that even if the extortion plot had fallen through, he had done well in crafting the machine. Now that the bomb was taken care of, I guess, the FBI turned their attention to finding the culprit. They wasted little time in beginning to gather probable evidence and debris from the area surrounding the casino. They spent weeks combing through the wreckage, searching for signs of explosives or the maker. From the FBI's Sacramento, San Francisco, and Los Angeles bureaus, over a dozen special agents trained in bombing scene investigation were dispatched to carry out the search. The crime scene's perimeter was secured with the assistance of the Army National Guard. The goal of the casino's operations was to open the unharmed portion of its gaming area immediately. Time is money in a casino. And indeed, the casino reopened almost immediately, and they actually built a massive wall with a picture window in it, allowing gamblers to watch for the next few weeks as the FBI processed the crime scene. That's pretty cool, actually. Over the next several weeks, investigators interviewed hundreds of witnesses and 500 suspects. The first big break came from Nancy DeMenico, the owner of the Balajo Motel in South Lake Tahoe. Apparently, the three men had stayed in the hotel the night before they planted the machine and made crude comments about Nancy, who in return wrote down the license plate number of the white van they were driving. That's what you get for making crude comments to a woman. The investigators did search John's home, having found the van registration matched his address, but all those beer cans and joints actually were an effective cover. No bomb-making mastermind lived in that apartment. No way. It would take a while before investigators made their way back to John. Almost a year after the bomb was planted, on August 15, 1981, John was finally arrested for the crime. But how did they realize that the full-time slob was also a part-time demolition expert? Well, John's son, John Jr., was dating someone. And I guess when you're dating someone, you tell them all your deep, dark secrets, including that your dad blew up a Harvey's casino. And in another tale of Do Not Scorn Your Woman, when those two broke up, that woman told her new boyfriend about the crazy tale of her ex's dad who blew up Harvey's casino. That boyfriend tipped off the FBI, but let's be real, not out of the goodness of his heart, but for the reward money. I don't know exactly how much that lucky boyfriend netted, but I do know a $500,000 reward had been offered by Harvey's for information on the case. And that boyfriend of a jilted ex-lover had exactly the information needed. The FBI then began a complicated surveilling of John Jr. before arresting him in August of 1981. After threatening John Jr. with perjury and jail time if he didn't roll over on his dad, John Jr. did just that. And John Sr. was finally in for some good old-fashioned justice. John Sr. was arrested, and the blue coveralled Bill Brown and Terry Lee Hall were arrested the following day. Terry was found guilty of conspiracy and interstate transportation of explosives, but was acquitted on charges of extortion and interstate travel to commit extortion. Bill pled guilty to his charges for a reduced sentence, but both served time in federal prison. John's two sons, John Jr. and Jim, both entered pleas of guilty in 1981 for their roles in the bombing, namely stealing all that dynamite with their dad and knowing their dad was going to blow up a casino and doing precisely nothing. The two served no prison time in exchange for testifying against their father. Ella Joan Williams, the unfortunate typist, pled guilty to being an accessory in the extortion bombing and got a recommendation for parole from prosecutors. John Sr. had both a state and a federal trial, and the state trial was a bit of a spectacle, with John opting to defend himself and using the time to expound on his manifesto. On October 22, 1982, John was convicted of federal extortion and bombing. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Jim Burgess, John's son, has a successful metalworking business in Fresno, California. He credits the FBI agents and prosecutors from the bombing for helping him move on and lead a productive life. I don't really know how this works, but apparently John Burgess Sr. would have actually been eligible for parole in 2011, but he died of liver cancer at the Southern Nevada Correctional Center on August 27, 1996. It was almost 16 years to the day from the Harvey's casino bombing. According to FBI experts, John's bomb remains the most complex improvised explosive device they have examined, and a replica of the machine is still used in FBI training. To date, no one has been able to fully disarm a model of John's bomb. FBI agent Chris Roney said, quote, "Harvey's bomb was probably for me the biggest event or the biggest bombing case I was ever involved with," end quote. The explosion that John built caused $18 million in damage and forced most of the resort to close for 10 months. But Harvey's Lake Tahoe survived and rebuilt, and today is in the same location, taking money from people sitting at the blackjack table, sipping on Long Island iced teas, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Thanks for hanging out with me. There has to be a better way to not lose money in a casino than building a bomb to extort the money you've gambled away. There has to be a better way. Next week, we're making a very simple drink while we talk about someone you might imagine is an unusual criminal. We're drinking a screwdriver while we talk about Tim, the Toolman Taylor. I can't even do it. Make sure you pick up the ingredients for the drink, which are vodka and orange juice. But when there are more than 2 ingredients, you can see what they are in the description box. I'll see you next week, and remember, there are always alternatives to building a gigantic bomb with the hopes of extorting a casino.